The city of Ouagadougou was wide awake before the sun. Roosters cried like prophets, impatient vendors hauled crates of peppers and fish into the stalls, and radios hissed politics over boiling pots of millet porridge. It was a day like any other, until the silence began to spread. Not the kind that comes with danger, but the kind that travels before something holy. At first, no one noticed the boy. He was barefoot, skin dusky with wind-blown sand, wrapped in a faded yellow shirt far too big for him. A woven bag bounced gently against his side as he walked, his head held high, his eyes scanning not the goods or the noise, but the faces. He looked no older than 11. But there was something unnerving in how still he walked, as if the world bent around his presence. At the edge of the market, an old griot leaned against a drum carved with the names of kings. His fingers froze mid-beat when he saw the child. For a long second, he could not breathe. The boy stepped onto the wooden platform in the center of the square, where politicians stood during campaign season and preachers during drought. He didn't shout. He didn't ask for coin. He only said, "A lion once promised never to bite the hand that fed it. But when it grew hungry, it forgot the taste of kindness." Laughter came first. Someone near the fruit stand snorted. "Look at this. A preacher in a child's body?" But the boy didn't move. He pulled a small, weathered calabash from his bag, dipped his fingers in, and scattered the water into the air. It glistened briefly in the rising sun. When the first drop touches stone, the drums will go quiet. When the second touches blood, a crown will slip. And when the third touches truth, a leader will remember his mother. No one laughed now. A few backed away. A group of young men whispered nervously, but one old woman, her eyes clouded by cataracts and memory, stepped forward slowly, clutching a cane carved with ancestral markings. "I've heard this riddle," she whispered. "In my dreams. Long ago." The boy turned to her gently. "Because the time has come." She took a long, shaking breath, then said only one word, "Send for the governor." Governor Ibrahim Traoré sat in his office, the sun barely cresting over the low hills of the capital. His desk overflowed with reports, deforestation protests, border tensions, a security meeting with the President of Ghana in less than 3 hours. And yet, he could not focus. The message had arrived wrapped in banana leaf, carried by a woman from a village he hadn't visited in 20 years. She said only this: "There is a boy speaking your name with the voice of your mother." Traoré folded the paper again. A memory clawed at him, his mother's lullaby, sung beside a cracked clay stove, the rhythm of her voice against thunder. He stood without a word, picked up his plain white robe, and turned to his chief aide. "Cancel everything," he said. The aide blinked. "Sir, you have a ministerial summit." "I said cancel everything," Ibrahim repeated, more gently now. "Today, I am not a governor. Today, I go as a son." The road to the market was narrow, dust-streaked, and old. Ibrahim didn't take the convoy. He didn't want cameras, or rifles, or crowds. Just a single aide and the quiet hum of thought. As he stepped out into the market square, the boy was still there, seated cross-legged on the platform, untouched by the heat, the noise, or the weight of eyes. The crowd parted wordlessly as the governor approached. Ibrahim stared down at the boy. The boy stared up. Neither spoke. Until finally, Ibrahim said, "You sent for me?" The boy shook his head. "I only spoke. But truth always sends for its listener." The silence deepened. Somewhere in the back, a goat cried out. Ibrahim crouched beside the boy, dust gathering at the hems of his robe. "What truth?" The boy pulled something from his bag, a worn cloth bundle, wrapped in faded green. He placed it in the governor's hand. "Open it," he said. Inside was a single copper coin. Etched with a woman's face. The same face that once smiled from Ibrahim's bedside photo frame as a child. The coin was decades old. Impossible to find now. Except. He looked at the boy again, heart suddenly thundering. "Where did you get this?" The boy stood. "From the woman who sang to you when your father died." Ibrahim staggered back a step. Before he could speak, the boy whispered, "When the drums stop, listen for her voice." And just like that, he stepped down from the platform, walked into the crowd, and disappeared. But the drums were still now. All across the market. As if they, too, were listening for something lost. And in Ibrahim's hand, the coin burned like a question he had spent his whole life forgetting. By noon, the sun cast harsh gold over the rooftops of Ouagadougou, but Ibrahim Traoré still hadn't left the market. He stood beneath the whispering neem trees near the edge of the square, the copper coin still clutched tightly in his hand. His aides had grown restless, whispering about the time, the summit, the press waiting back at the capital. But Ibrahim wasn't listening. He stared at the ground where the boy had stood, where the world had shifted beneath his feet without making a sound. How did he know that coin? He finally muttered, not really to anyone, more to the ghost of memory still circling like a hawk above him. Only my mother kept that coin. She said it belonged to her grandmother. I lost it the day we buried her. No one answered. That night, Ibrahim returned to the palace, but sleep never came. He paced the floor of his private study, old family photographs spread across his desk like puzzle pieces from a forgotten life. His eyes fell on one image, a woman in a deep green headwrap holding a young Ibrahim beside a cooking pot. Her hands were worn, but her smile reached all the way into the boy's chest. He had never known her full name. Everyone in the house called her Mina. She had come to care for him after his father's death, hired briefly to help his grieving mother. She left just before his mother remarried. No one remembered where she came from. No one had asked. He closed his eyes. That woman had once held him through storms. And now a boy appeared, carrying her words, her coin, her riddles. 2 days passed. 3 more signs followed. At a ministerial meeting, a hawk flew into the glass dome above the conference chamber. No one understood how it had gotten so high, or why it flew in circles above Ibrahim's seat before collapsing on the marble floor. In a northern province, red-colored water flowed through the wells after a mining company's illegal spill, a story buried by bureaucracy until now. Then came the final sign. During a televised cultural festival, the National Drum Ensemble stopped mid-performance. Not due to failure or protest. The lead drummer simply froze. When asked why later, he said, "I couldn't hear the rhythm. It was like someone else was drumming in my ears." The boy had said, "When the first drop touches stone, the drums will go quiet. When the second touches blood, a crown will slip. When the third touches truth." Ibrahim didn't wait for the rest to unfold. On the third morning, he returned to the market, plain shirt, no entourage. The market was full, yet quiet. Vendors recognized him and bowed their heads, but no one called out. As if they, too, were waiting for something sacred to pass between him and the air. He walked to the drum circle. The boy was already there. Seated again. Cross-legged. Eyes closed. This time, when Ibrahim approached, the boy opened his eyes slowly and said, "The water has touched truth." "You know now." "Know what?" Ibrahim asked, voice brittle. The boy tilted his head. "That your story is missing a name." A long silence. The boy stood and led him out of the market. No words. Just footsteps on dust. They walked through narrow alleys, past vendors, metalworkers, tailors, and children playing with sticks in the sand. Eventually, they reached a small clinic, unassuming, peeling paint, faded signage in 2 languages. Inside, the boy pointed to a woman mopping the floor. Her back was bent, her hair wrapped in a faded blue cloth. Her hands, though aged, moved with practiced grace. She didn't see them. "Who is she?" Ibrahim whispered. The boy turned his head, gaze never leaving the woman. "Ask her the lullaby." "What lullaby?" "You remember it when it rains." A flash of thunder in Ibrahim's skull. Rain hammering the tin roof. A woman's voice singing over storm and sobs. He took a breath, stepped forward, and said the first line aloud. "Little lion, don't fear the night. The woman froze. Her mop handle slipped. She turned slowly. Her eyes met his. Tears surfaced instantly. Ibrahim, she said, not in a title or question, but in memory. He couldn't speak. Mina, he whispered. She walked forward slowly, trembling. You were so small. You clung to me like a cub. I told them not to send me away. I never knew why you left, Ibrahim whispered. I didn't, she said softly. I was pushed. His throat tightened. You were there when my father died. She nodded. You sang to me for weeks. You wouldn't let go. Again, she nodded. And then, for the first time in decades, he leaned forward and wrapped his arms around her. Tight. Like he did at age 6, when the world had crumbled and only one voice had kept him whole. Behind them, the boy waited. When Ibrahim turned, ready to speak, the boy was already gone. That night, Ibrahim stood on his balcony, staring out over the lights of the capital. He had cancelled all official business. His aides were furious. So were several ministers. But he didn't care. He was writing a letter. Not a statement. A personal letter, handwritten. To the Council of Elders, to the media, and to his people. Because tomorrow, he would tell the truth. And it would begin with a question. The one that changed everything. The one he asked a cleaning woman in a dusty hallway. Why did you sing to me, when no one else did? By sunrise, the nation was murmuring. Not in protest or panic, but in confusion. The president had postponed a strategic summit. Again. Journalists speculated. Ministers whispered. The Council of Elders convened behind closed doors. Even the international press began asking, where is Ibrahim Traoré? They didn't know he was in the depot neighborhood. Not in uniform. Not in convoy. Just a man in sandals, walking quietly down the same dirt road he once played on as a child, led by a memory that now had a name. Mina walked beside him in silence. Her house was small, cracked walls and rusted windows, but the scent of warm tea and crushed lemongrass greeted them before they even reached the gate. Inside, faded photos hung on a crooked nail. A small stool sat under a window that overlooked nothing but dust. Mina poured him tea like she had always done, no ceremony, no deference. Just a mother serving a son. Ibrahim sat in silence. His eyes fell on a wooden box near the bookshelf. May I? He asked. Mina nodded. He opened it and gasped. Inside lay a small cotton shirt, his, from decades ago, still marked with the stitched initials of his name, sewn by his late mother. A tiny drum carved from a gourd. And a yellowed photograph of a young boy curled in Mina's lap, asleep. I kept these, she said quietly, not because I thought you'd return, but because I couldn't throw away a piece of my heart. He was trembling now. All these years, you were still here. Living like this? I didn't need much, she said. I had memories. I had silence. He took a deep breath. The coin, he said. The boy gave me the coin my mother gave you. Mina's hand stopped mid-pour. I never gave it to him. Ibrahim looked up. Mina shook her head. I've never seen that child before. The room thickened with silence. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, unexpected, sudden. The dry season had not yet ended. A distant drumbeat stopped mid-rhythm. That evening, Ibrahim went live on national television. No teleprompter. No press. He stood before the people not as a ruler, but as a man in plain white robes. My fellow citizens, today, I speak not from power, but from memory. He told them everything. Not about politics or pipelines. But about a woman who had once held him when he couldn't speak. Who wiped away his fevers. Who told him he would be great, not because of titles, but because of kindness. He showed them the coin. Held it up. And then said the words no leader in the region had ever dared speak live. I was raised by a woman history forgot. Her name is Mina. And I owe her everything. The crowd watching at home didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They wept. In the following days, ministers scrambled. Some praised him. Others whispered, "Has the president gone soft?" But Ibrahim didn't flinch. Instead, he took one more unexpected step. He called for a formal review of a long-buried policy, one that granted elite families unfair land ownership rights based on colonial records. That policy had displaced thousands, including Mina. Within a week, rumors of the boy spread again. He had been spotted, walking beside rivers that had run red from pollution, sitting quietly in orphanage courtyards, speaking in riddles at village firesides. No one could find him for long. He never stayed. But everywhere he went, he left behind the same phrase. The third head of the snake eats its own heart. The media mocked it. Until a classified memo leaked. A government official, one of the president's inner circle, had been accepting foreign bribes to sell mineral rights. A betrayal of sovereignty. The same man who once said, "Mina is just a cleaner." He was arrested quietly. The story exploded. And the prophecy was clear. The first sign, the hawk in the dome. The second, blood in the water. The third, a leader who remembered his mother. The third head of the snake had eaten its own heart. One night, Ibrahim stood alone in the palace garden. He looked up to the sky. The stars were out. But something else stirred inside him. The boy. The boy who had set this all in motion. Where had he come from? What force walked in his bare feet? That question burned brighter than any policy, any news cycle. And so, the next morning, he did something no president had ever done. He walked through the city, alone, asking strangers one question. "Have you seen a barefoot boy, who speaks like thunder wrapped in silence?" They told him the boy had been seen in Toma, then Kaya, then back near Bobo Dioulasso. Always walking. Always quiet. And always arriving before something happened, a revelation, a reckoning, or a moment of public soul-searching. But each time Ibrahim arrived, the boy was gone. Only the stories remained. In Toma, a market woman claimed he'd sat beside her blind husband and recited, word for word, the man's last memory of his late mother. In Kaya, a street preacher swore the boy stood beside him silently for hours, and after he left, the preacher could no longer shout lies, only weep. In Bobo Dioulasso, a child said the boy knelt at the city's oldest tree, whispering in a language no one recognized, and that the tree, an hour later, fell without wind or storm. Weeks passed. Then came the collapse. One of Ibrahim's most trusted ministers, a longtime ally, resigned without warning and fled the country. A trove of documents revealed secret land deals, suppressed voter rolls, and orders to silence community elders during last year's referendum. Ibrahim read every page. And on the last one, in red ink, was scrawled a single proverb. The one who eats alone, dies in a house with no doors. He closed the folder. The truth wasn't just in politics. It was in parable. And only one person had spoken in such riddles. That night, the rains returned. Not scattered drops, but the kind of storm that silences cities. The capital went dark. Streetlights blinked out. Even the palace lost power for a moment. Ibrahim stood at his window, hand resting on the frame, watching the clouds. Something pressed against his chest, an ache, deep and old. He turned suddenly. And there, standing by the balcony, barefoot, soaked in rainwater, was the boy. Not a guard had seen him enter. Not a door had opened. "You're not real," Ibrahim said, breath unsteady. The boy didn't respond. "I asked everyone. They say you vanish." Still, no answer. Ibrahim stepped closer. His voice softened. "Why did you come to me?" The boy finally spoke. "Because you were the one who forgot. And the one meant to remember." The president's knees nearly gave way. Rain dripped from his sleeves. The storm outside cracked against the glass, but inside, the silence screamed. You're not just a child. I am memory, the boy said. I am warning. I am the song sung in kitchens by women the world never notices. I am the truth you buried when you chose power over pain. A long pause. Who are you really? Ibrahim asked. The boy stepped forward, reached into his sack, and pulled out something small, a child's bracelet, faded and frayed. Ibrahim staggered backward. That was mine. The boy nodded. She gave it to me. When she knew her time was short. She said, give this to him when he forgets where he came from. Ibrahim collapsed into the nearest chair. Mina. She's gone, the boy said gently. She passed yesterday morning. Tears streamed freely now. She never told me she was sick, Ibrahim whispered. She didn't want you to carry her suffering, the boy said. She had already carried yours. The next morning, Ibrahim addressed the nation. No cameras. No teleprompters. Just a voice broadcast across radio and speaker. A voice heavy, cracked, but certain. Today I do not mourn in silence. I mourn out loud. I mourn a woman named Mina, whose name is not in our textbooks, who has no street named after her, but whose hands shaped the heart of your president. He paused. And then. She died with nothing. But she gave me everything. He announced a national day of mourning, not just for Mina, but for every forgotten caregiver, every hidden grandmother, every woman who had raised nations in silence. The boy had disappeared again. But this time, Ibrahim didn't chase. Because now, he understood. You don't find the boy. You listen for him. Later that week, Ibrahim returned to Mina's neighborhood. He found her house empty, the floor swept, the air still. On the kitchen table sat a note, written in a hand both familiar and trembling. Tell them, my son, that when mothers are forgotten, the soil we stand on cracks. But when one son remembers, the nation begins to heal. That night, Ibrahim knelt in prayer, not the ceremonial kind, but the quiet, private kind that only men who've broken and rebuilt themselves can utter. The mango tree outside her home swayed in the wind. He stayed until dawn. And when he rose, he did so with resolve. 3 weeks later, the sun rose gently over Ouagadougou, casting long golden streaks across the rooftops and mango trees. But something in the city had shifted. In the center of the capital, the national square had been transformed. No political banners. No military parade. Just one empty chair, carved from local wood, draped in a cloth woven by village women, patterned with the colors of Burkina Faso's soil, red for the ancestors, green for the harvest, gold for hope. And beside it, a single talking drum. Silent. Waiting. At precisely 9 a.m., President Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward. He wore no sash, no medals. Just the same white robe he'd worn to Mina's home. The crowd, which had grown from hundreds to thousands, hushed. Cameras were rolling. Every television in the country, every radio, every classroom was tuned in. Ibrahim cleared his throat. Today, we honor not power, but presence. He paused. Presence in our lives that goes unseen. Love that goes unthanked. Mothers whose names we forget. Women whose footsteps carry nations forward, without ever being recorded. His voice trembled, but did not break. I was raised by one such woman. Her name was Mina. Not madam. Not doctor. Not minister. Just Mina. She fed me when my soul was starving. She shielded me when I had no words. She sang to me when I had no future. He turned to the drum and placed a folded piece of cloth on top of it, his childhood shirt, once kept safe in Mina's wooden box. Then, slowly, he took the chair. And for the first time in modern Burkinabe history, a national holiday was declared not for independence, not for victory, but for remembrance. The Foundation of Forgotten Hands was announced that same day. Its mission, to find and uplift the hidden caregivers of the nation. Women in villages who raised orphans, grandmothers raising grandchildren, cleaning staff in hospitals who became counselors when no one else listened. Mina's face, faded, kind, eyes like stories, became the symbol of the movement. Donations poured in. Churches rang bells. Mosques offered prayers. Radio stations played lullabies. And schoolchildren began their day by saying, "Thank you, Mama Mina." But there was one more journey Ibrahim had to make. The return to Kwayogo. His childhood village. This time, he didn't go alone. With him walked a group of children, the first beneficiaries of the foundation. Orphaned, displaced, some formerly on the streets. Dressed in bright clothes, holding little carved drums, their laughter echoed through the red dust roads as the convoy neared the village gates. The elders awaited them beneath the baobab tree. One by one, the children stepped forward, announcing their names, and the names of the women who had raised them. And when it was his turn, Ibrahim stepped forward, removed his shoes, and stood barefoot on the soil of his ancestors. He looked up at the villagers, many of whom still remembered a boy who had once chased goats through these fields, and spoke. "I came back, not as president, but as a son." That evening, a quiet ceremony was held near the old well. Children sang. Old women braided the girls' hair. Fires burned low, and the smell of millet and ginger tea drifted across the air. One little girl tapped Ibrahim's hand. "Sir," she whispered shyly, "is it true you cried for your mother?" He smiled. "Yes. I cried because I remembered." She nodded, satisfied. "My auntie says that's when a man becomes whole again." He laughed, tears in his eyes. "She's wiser than most kings." Later, as the stars stretched across the sky like ancestral fingerprints, Ibrahim sat beneath the baobab tree alone. The children had gone to sleep. The fire was dying down. But he wasn't waiting for sleep. He was listening. And in that quiet, he heard it. A single drumbeat. Faint. Distant. Rhythmic. He turned toward the sound, and there, under the silhouette of the tree line, stood the boy. Still barefoot. Still silent. But smiling. Ibrahim rose slowly, walked over, and stood beside him. No words passed between them. Just the night air, the crackle of embers, and the pulse of truth in their chests. Finally, Ibrahim spoke. "Will I see you again?" The boy tilted his head. "When someone else forgets. I'll return." Ibrahim nodded slowly. Then asked, "Who are you really?" The boy looked up at the stars and said, "I am the echo of every name never written down. I am the child left behind, and the hand that never let go. I am the drum that waits to be heard." Then he turned and walked into the night. Back in the capital, life resumed. But something was different. In parliament halls, ministers now began their speeches by thanking the people who raised them. In homes, elders told stories they'd buried for years. And across the nation, whenever someone did something noble and quiet, people began to say, "The drum has spoken." In Ibrahim's office, behind his desk, now hung a new painting. It showed a simple kitchen. A woman in blue humming over a pot. And a boy, smiling up at her, wearing a bracelet of tiny beads. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "For Mama Mina, the one who remembered me when I forgot myself. If you ever feel forgotten, listen closely. The drum is still there. And someone, somewhere, remembers you."